I took a cleaning job one night because I was broke, but I ended up getting far more than I bargained for. What started as an odd gig turned into a night I may never escape, mentally. Anyway, it all started when I got a notification from Clean Quick, the app one work for. It was a last-minute request for someone to clean a penthouse suite in one of the city's most upscale buildings. I don't usually work nights, but the pay was almost triple what I normally make, and rent was coming due. When I arrived at the building around midnight, I was struck by how grand it was. The kind of place where everything sparkles, and even the air smells expensive. The concierge barely glanced at me as I told him I was there for a cleaning job, instead waving me toward the elevator with a tired nod. I figured, fine, I'll be in and out quickly. The elevator ride to the top floor was unnervingly smooth and silent. When the doors opened to the penthouse, I half expected to be greeted by someone, but there was no one in sight. The door to the suite was slightly ajar, like it was welcoming me inside. Taking a deep breath, I stepped in, closing the door softly behind me. Inside, the penthouse was pristine, but it felt staged, like a museum where everything was placed just so, but with none of the warmth you'd expect in a home. I noticed a slight hum in the air, almost like the low throb of machinery, though I couldn't see anything that could be making the sound. I pulled out my cleaning supplies and got to work, figuring I'd wipe down some surfaces, fluff some pillows, and be done within an hour. But as I dusted a shelf near the large floor-to-ceiling windows, something caught my eye. There was a faint, almost invisible pattern on the glass. Strange symbols, etched into the windows like they'd been drawn with a greasy finger, faintly reflecting the city lights. I squinted, wondering if it was some fancy decorator's touch, but as I leaned in closer, the hairs on my arms stood up. The symbols were intricate, almost hypnotic, and seemed to shift if I looked at them too long. I brushed it off as a weird, artsy touch from the designer and kept working. By the time I moved to the bedroom, it was nearing 1 a.m., and I was starting to feel off. That hum I'd heard earlier had grown louder, and the lights were dimmer than they'd been when I started. I felt like I was being watched, but I told myself it was just my imagination running wild. As I started vacuuming, I noticed a journal on the nightstand. It looked old, with a worn leather cover and yellowing pages. Normally, I'd never touch a guest's belongings, but this felt different, like it wanted to be found. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic, and there were entries dating back several years. The last tenant, apparently, had kept it as a record of strange things they'd experienced in the penthouse. They described feelings of being watched, shadows in the mirrors, and, disturbingly, a hum that only grew stronger with time. One passage, dated about 2 years ago, caught my eye. I'm writing this to remind myself it's real. Every night, the whispers come, louder each time. They want me to leave, or maybe they want something else. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see things. I'm going to try to stay somewhere else, anywhere else, until I can figure out what's happening here. I froze. It sounded like the tenant had been experiencing the same hum and feelings of unease that were starting to weigh on me. I set the journal down, deciding I'd wasted enough time on someone else's paranoia, and went back to cleaning, working faster now. That's when the lights went out. I stood there in pitch-black silence, trying to process what had just happened. My heart was pounding, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd just overloaded the power somehow. But then I heard a creak, like a footstep, coming from the living room. I turned on my phone's flashlight and slowly made my way out of the bedroom. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone flickered, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing near the window, a tall, shadowy figure, watching me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. There was no response, just the low hum, now louder and almost vibrating through the floor. My phone flickered again, and when the light steadied, the figure was gone, but I could still feel its presence, watching, lurking. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like something was keeping it shut, trapping me inside. Panic started to set in as I yanked on the handle, desperately trying to force it open. It was no use. Suddenly, the hum intensified, almost like a droning chant, and the symbols on the windows began to glow faintly, pulsing in time with the sound. I backed away, clutching my phone like a lifeline, my mind racing. In a last-ditch effort, I opened the journal again, skimming through the pages to find anything that could explain what was happening. Near the end of the entries, there was a desperate note from the previous tenant. The symbols, they're supposed to be a barrier, but they're weakening. I don't know how to fix them. I stared at the glowing symbols, understanding now that they weren't just decorative. They were a barrier, and it was failing. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and I could feel something pressing in on me, something dark and cold. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed a piece of charcoal from the fireplace and tried to trace over the symbols, hoping it would strengthen them. As I redrew each symbol, the hum seemed to recede slightly, but the room grew colder, and I could feel the presence circling me, angry, desperate to break through. Hours passed in a blur as I worked my way around the room, retracing the symbols while fighting off the overwhelming feeling of dread. I was exhausted, my hands trembling, but I knew I couldn't stop. Every time I hesitated, the hum grew stronger, and I could see dark shapes moving in the corners of my vision. Finally, as dawn broke, I finished the last symbol, and the hum stopped abruptly. The oppressive feeling lifted, and the room fell silent. I stumbled back, breathing heavily, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows. When I looked at the door, it was open. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my things and bolted, not stopping until I was outside. Gasping for air, the concierge gave me a strange look as I passed, but I didn't care. I got in my car and drove home, vowing never to take another night job again. That night changed me. I still hear that hum sometimes, especially late at night when everything is quiet. It's faint, almost like it's calling me back, but I won't go back, not for any amount of money.